Hi, here's Alex from the Siebel Hub. Welcome to another episode of Code Along, and we are discovering here in the next hour or so an old blog post. So we will revisit an old blog post of mine and take it into the present with Siebel 22. So we are on the Siebel Hub homepage. You sure have registered for the Siebel Hub already, and you know we have thousands of blog posts from the past, almost 20 years of Siebel. And I would like to point your attention to the Knowledge tab, where we have, of course, the famous CRM, Siebel CRM, always up-to-date training offering. So like the Siebel 22 workshop or the upgrade workshop or the OpenUI classes, basics, professional, or rookie trainings for aspiring developers and administrators and for public sector. So if you are inclined to learn Siebel CRM from the best instructors, make sure you check out these pages on the Siebel Hub. But now we are going somewhere different to books and media, and there is the business service library. So let's check that out. And the business service library is something I started when I wrote the Siebel Essentials blog. So that blog has been merged into the Siebel Hub. And in 2015, so almost 7 years ago, we made sure that all the articles are still relevant for modern versions of Siebel. Back then it was IP15 with OpenUI, so that was a novelty back then. And now it's 2022, and I started revisiting, the business service library again. And one of the business services, so if you have some time, of course, on your hands, go to the page and look at all the business services, that exist in Siebel CRM, and that's just a tiny fraction of standard business services. But those are the business services that really developers should really know about. And most of them are well documented, so the blog posts augment the Siebel bookshelf. And sometimes there are a few tricks we do with those business services and show them in the blog post. So clicking on each name of the business service will take you to a blog post or a landing page. And the one business service we talk about today is the Unified Messaging Service, or the Unified Messaging Framework, listed under special purpose here, along with the Rosette Transformation Toolkit, yay, RSTT, that is part of the Siebel Order Management area. So this Unified Messaging Service, or the Unified Messaging Framework, caught my attention when I started teaching and learning order management. The new version of Siebel Order Management, that is no longer new, came out in 7.8 or something. And that includes a messaging framework, which can show, not only these messages, so a little bit of sentimental journey, as we see a lot of Internet Explorer screenshots here. I keep them just for historical purposes. Of course, today Siebel doesn't no longer run in Internet Explorer. It's not even certified for that browser. But yeah, that was the case back then when I took the screenshot. So the framework allows administrators to define, let's call it, templates for messages with payloads, with replacement text, so to speak, and with actions, buttons that you can place on the dialog box. And those buttons would invoke, for example, a business service method. And all that without a single line of code. So it's actually a no-code along that we do today, but there will be a little bit of coding, as it's a business service, and you can call it from eScript. So the page here tells us that, this is the copy of the original article, and there are 3 parts of blog posts, 3 blog posts where we can start to have a closer look at the unified messaging framework and see how we can put it to good use in modern versions of Siebel CRM. So let's go to the first article here. So we also see a nice screenshot saying hello from OpenUI. So that was from the 2015 rewrite of that article. The original article is really old, from 2009. And there must be a bookshelf link here. Yeah, that probably points to a very old bookshelf guide, but we notice there's in the order management infra guide, there's a whole chapter about unified messaging. So let's go to the new bookshelf. Latest we have here at the time of recording is January 22, and go to the order management infrastructure guide. Let's see if we can find that unified messaging chapter. There it is. All right. So that's definitely a good guide if you are fresh with order management. All of it, not just unified messaging, but here today we talk about unified messaging. So this gives us a general idea about the feature. So it's well documented. And there's even a chapter of implementing a custom message generation engine. And working with message types and such. And if we go back to the first blog article, this is really an introduction to UMF. So it's not customizing anything, it's just using what's there to create, a product recommendation. This is also a trip down memory lane. I mean, what is a 6 megapixel digital camera? That was really something back, a long time ago. But we're going to try and cross-sell a camera bag with the camera. We can also cross-sell, of course, a protective cover for a smartphone. Yeah, why not? But these articles happen to be in the Siebel sample database. So you need for this the sample database. So nowadays, it's quite difficult to actually get a Siebel sample database in Siebel 21, 22. You have to have an OCI account, and you actually have to have one of these OCI images as an instance, and where you can select actually the sample database to be installed. So at the moment, at the time of this recording, there's actually no image available on OCI. So only if you have a recent machine, then you have a sample database. But if you have like a Siebel 16 installation, whatever, you can install the sample database along. And yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can get the data out of that sample database and put it in a modern Siebel database. But that is not the point here. So on the Siebel training image, we have the Siebel sample database. So that's the training machine from the Siebel Hub that you can purchase or hire. And so let's follow these steps here. So here we are on a training machine. We go to Siebel Call Center, log in as admin. And go to administration product. So that's the sample database has lots of product. In case you don't have any useful products in your training database, just create some. You need 2 products basically. So let's query in our case for that camera or those bags. Okay, we got one camera, we got two bags. Well, we're gonna cross-sell the bigger one, I guess. And now we need to change the organization because SADMIN is in default organization. So we add default organization to the MVG here. Let's do it for all the products that we found. So that's for product visibility. And the next step is, let's go back to the post. So we have that, set the price list, yeah, for all the products on the master price list. So we have them on the same price list. Good idea. So here's the pricing tab, price lists. Okay, the camera is on the master price list as it seems, and the two other products, well, let's just change the price list here. Okay, so that way they will appear on a quote with the correct pricing. And next step is to create a recommendation message. There's a screenshot here. So recommending, we are going to create a message to recommend a cross-sell, recommend the bag, perfect bag for your camera. Okay, recommendations. Make sure we do this on the camera. So when you put the camera on a quote or order, there will be a recommendation message. So here's the message, and we give it a score of 100, and we recommend the big bag, and the message type is cross-sell. Recommendation, then there's a reason, well, the perfect bag for your camera. Okay, we don't really need anything else, just save this, maybe clear the cache here. Okay, what does the article tell us then? Okay, that's it. And we will now create a test quote and just see what happens in Siebel Vanilla. Okay, to quote we go. And we need an account and a last name, so call it test UMF1. Let's use the AK Parker account maybe. Does that populate? No, it doesn't. AK Parker, need a last name. Oh, let's just pick Jacob here. And the price list. Okay, add and go. That's a nice way of creating a quote quickly. Of course, there are 1,000 other ways. Okay, so here's our quote. I didn't pick up the account. Man, okay. We'll see why the account is important. So, okay, AK Parker, and everyone is still here. All right. So let's go to line items first. And here we add the camera product. Okay, that's kicking off some workflows the first time, cold start. Browser becomes impatient, but there we are. Okay. Nothing much happened apart from adding the product with the correct price from the price list. Nice enough, but there is a messages icon that is active now. And we click that message. We see the recommendation along with the, 3 buttons: accept, reject, send info. So what happens if we click accept? Oh, well, we add the cross-sell product to the quote. Okay, nice feature there. So now the recommendation is no longer, because, well, we have added the product, right? So that was a successful first test, and now we can look a little bit more closer into an actual pop-up, because what we want to do subsequently is have a way of creating pop-up messages without much coding, without writing browser-side code, etc. So let's take a look at these message types. So there's a screen for order management administration in the sitemap. So if you look for message types, you'll find the screen, and there's a message types view. So in this screen, you handle signals, variable maps, all the kind of order management stuff that you might know about or not. And there's one specific message type for the cross-sell recommendation. So it's standard, it's seed data, and the standard display mode is passive. That's why it was so shy and did just display as a tiny little icon. So we change that display mode to active. Let's have a look around. So first we have placeholders, square brackets. So there, when the service is called, the property set contains values for these. It's actually property set properties. So they are replaced at runtime. We have seen this. And there's a payload section where fields from the related business components are mapped to fields in the response business component. That is the one output of this service, is to create a response. And then there are translations. We have German language pack installed, so there's the short and full text can be translated, and we have the responses, which are the actual buttons. Notice they can be translated as well. And one of the buttons executes a business service method. That was the accept button, but the others don't. We just observe that, right? So, and there's a response type. Again, that's the response business component comes into play here. Okay, we only made one change, display mode active. There's a cache we can clear. Let's create another test quote. Let's not waste time with the account here. Do that later. Okay, and okay, probably just picks contact from the account. Let's add one really quick. Let's call it Tom Seller. And so create a new contact quickly. All right, so ready for action. So let's go to line items, let's create that, add that camera again. And this time we have a pop-up active message. So with the same recommendation, the image is not in the file system, so we can change that later, but there is a place for a kind of notification icon, whatever you want. And we still have the same buttons here, except reject. Let's click send info for once. Okay, so all right. So what has happened? Let's go to the responses view or screen. So let's go for all responses and let's find responses that have been created today, just now. And actually two. One from Jacob, one from Tom. Oh, probably clicked on the button as well. But that was the result of clicking on the send info button. Respondent interested, and we have the account name and the contact there. So the marketing department could work this into a campaign or something. You see, you can create leads or opportunity from that. So that's the standard functionality that we have. So the first part of the 3 blog posts is just discovering the standard functionality, but that's of course important for understanding what we do next. So our goal is to, well, create these nice looking messages for almost any use case that we have to display a message to the user in a customizable applet. You know, CSS is your friend, whatever, and with buttons and actions that could even include calling a business service. So if we look at the second post, this one describes how to call the unified messaging service and display a custom dialog box in almost anywhere in Siebel, and you could use it outside of order management or inside order management. And we will deviate a little bit from the example here, which was done for accounts. Accounts is very close in order management. It's an order management enabled business component class, but I would like to demonstrate to do it, for example, for service requests, which is a standard business object, of course, but it's non-order management related. So just to prove a point there. The article also mentions an Oracle support document, which we have used as an inspiration there. So if you have an Oracle support account, just go there. And we start with creating the message type. So a custom message type in the message types view. Okay, so go to the administration order management screen, message types, and let's call it, well, what should we call it? A unique name. Okay, there's a screenshot we can use. So Siebel Hub UMF test, that's the name, display mode active. So display mode active, and the group is internal error message. Then there's a title, UMF test. Then there's a bitmap displayed along with active messages. So these bitmaps are basically literature items, and in the sample database are quite a lot, and if you haven't loaded the sample attachments, they don't work. So I'll just query here Well, let's add a literature item later. According to Bookshelf, the short text is almost never used. So let's put a message in there, but the full text is used always, and the full text and the short text can have these placeholders. So in our example, we want to deal with service requests. So we want to ask the user, let's say, do you want to keep that service request open, or do you want to cancel it or reject it? So let's say, do you want to keep this SR? And here we want to insert the row ID for lack of a better field. So row ID is not the field name, it's just a arbitrary placeholder text we have in square brackets. Do you want to keep this SR open or reject it? Okay, that's the question we ask the user. So row ID, of course, has to be handled, has to be passed in. So in the payload view, you can add that as a payload field. And you can or cannot map it to a response field. The response fields are the UMS response business component. So let's map it to document ID, maybe. Not important at the moment. And the responses, so these are the buttons we'll see on the pop-up. So we had one with, well, let's say keep open, and the response type. So if that's mapped to a response, that will be the response type. We have to choose, let's choose accepted or something, and log this and suppress repetition, and then add a second one, reject, right? We have rejected as the response type. So again, these response fields and type fields, they are from the response, UMS response BC. In case you do not specify a business service, then you will just get the response record in the S_communication table. You can use that later. And later on, we will associate a custom business service here to be executed, or a method of that executed when the user clicks the respective button. Okay, but now we should have two buttons. Now let's take care of that bitmap maybe. So it looks prettier. So we go to administration document, literature, and let's just add one of the Siebel graphics files, I would say. So in the AI, Siebel webroot images, there are plenty of standard images. Let's find a pretty one. Well, that alert is... Let's make it a... Why not? Alert. A blue bell. So that's our icon, and we can go back to the message. So that was UMF. That's our message, and we can now choose the bitmap. Let's see, can we sort? Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So that's the message. Let's see if we have everything. We have the message. It's not the same as in the blog post, mind you. As we said, we want to use this on top of service requests, not accounts. So we deviating a little bit from the blog post. So this has to work on top of the service request business object, or any view that's on top of that service request business object. So here we have 3 UMF virtual BCs. that need to be added to the business object. So now we have to, well, create a workspace and modify the repository a little bit. So let's use Web Tools. Okay, we create a new workspace. Well, let's call this UMF 01. And take a look at the service request business object. Make sure it's the correct one. And business object components. So is there, in the business component list, is there anything with UMF? Let's see. Nothing there. Okay, so we need to add them. So let's see if we have. Oh, there they are. Currently there are 4. There's a new one added in a while ago, the active list message. We don't need that actually, but we need the active message. And for good measure, we add all 4 of them really. So why not? No link required. So just add 4 records. All the UMF business component we can find. Okay, so that's the change here for the, and you have to do this for any business object that you want to use UMF with. So either it's already there as an order management business objects or not. And then it's business service time. So there's sample script code from Oracle that we use partially here. And that script code is available for download as well. So there's a screenshot, but you don't have to type it. So let's take that download link. And there is a main function and there's the pre-invoke method. So let's start with the pre-invoke method. Bracket missing. And the business service is called Siebel Hub UMF wrapper service. So, okay. So let's create a new business service. Siebel Hub UMF wrapper service. Don't worry about the project, just pick the first one. And display name string override. We just copy paste the name. And external. Okay. And now let's go to server scripts. Yep, eScript is fine. And let's get the code again. Okay, so what we do here, we switch the method name. So if the method is submit message, we call submit message function. Otherwise we break and there's a catch block. So easy enough. And so we need a new submit message function. So let's grab that here, create the function first. Create an empty function in the declarations. Invalid token. Oh, one token too many. No such method. Yeah, that's fine. So we create that method in the declarations. So let's save this. There we go. And now we can add the sample code. Quite a lot. That's it. Make sure we clean it up. Okay. So Shift Tab is your friend in Web Tools, by the way. So what do we do here? So most of this is from Oracle support, so as an example, but we get the unified messaging service as documented, create property sets, and then we transfer the first child of the input property set to the object payload property set variable. Else we create a new one. So if anything's passed into, we use it. If not, we create our own empty, set the type to payload, and now we grab some properties. Now this is highly there's some properties which are documented, which are always passed, but these ones like account and account ID, basically we call that business service passing in simple properties, and we add them to the payload property set. But we do not use account. So let's just comment those out and set the row ID payload property. Remember that payload field we have. And let's just use the same naming convention here. And you can add, here you would add lines, more lines, if you have more payload. Okay, so that corresponds to the payload that you want to add, well, send over to the business service and want to display in the message or use in the response or wherever. Okay, now you build a message property set. So there's a score field. You can pass it in. There's message ID, message types. All this is from Bookshelf. And then you add the child. The payload is the child. And then you have a message list. So you add the message property set to the list. And you could have more than one message in a message list, obviously. And then finally you invoke the add messages method of the unified messaging service, passing in the input property set and output. Okay, so that's the code that is a wrapper service around the unified messaging service. So it makes it easier to call it because you have this hierarchy of input with multiple messages, and each message has a payload. So study the Bookshelf guide if you're in doubt about this. So we are saving this, and yeah, that's a few benign warnings we can ignore. And we go back and we have our business service ready. Nice enough. Okay, and now we create a workflow to actually use that business service. So that workflow was written back then when I wrote the blog post, and it deals with the account business object. So I'm still importing it, and then we have to change it. So of course you could start from scratch. So a workflow just to call that wrapper service might seem a little bit over the top, but it makes things even easier for us in the long run. So there's another download here. It's actually a ZIP file. So already downloaded it previously. Just copying that since I'm on a different machine, and on the target machine going to save it locally, maybe in documents. So that's workflow SIF. And well, we have a modern version of WebTools, so we should be able to import that. It would be a nice treat here. So archive, import from archive, choose file, and import. And okay, it found the workflow process. Okay, override merge doesn't matter, it's a new workflow. So yeah, so everything from file, looking good. And yep, that, thank you very much, WebTools. So we should have a workflow process here by the name of UMF workflow. So what I'm doing now, we'll create a copy of that, since that one works on account and we want to have one for service requests. So let's copy that one and call it UMF workflow SR for service request, and change the business object to service request. In the copy. Okay, so now let's see what the copy looks like. Oh, nice and clean. So it has a few properties we can work out. So for example, the active BC is defaulted to account. So let's change that to service request. Then the display mode is active. That's what we want. We want a pop-up. Message type. So that's the name of the message type we created. So we need to be careful here. Better go back to the application, copy paste that message type. Could be a typo or whatever different name you choose. Okay, then there's a score passed in, and that's about it. And then there's the business service call. So the business service calls the Siebel Hub UMF wrapper service. Again, we should make sure that we really call the correct service. So in case we had a typo when created it, let's just look it up again. Could be a dead reference. Yep, something. Let's go by the name. Ah, there it is. Didn't work by display name, but here that's the wrapper service. And submit message is the method we want to call. And what are we passing in? So we're passing in the active BC. So that's the whole simple property set that we pass in, and that is going to be translated by the script into a hierarchical property set. So we pass in all of this, and there's a reference to the account business component. So account, we actually don't need that one, so we just delete it. And instead of account ID, we just change that to row ID. And we take the service request ID as the payload. Okay. So that's the magic payload that we want to display, the row ID of the service request, or anything else. You can pass it in, you can calculate it here. So now you see the point of using a workflow. You might want to prepare some stuff, look up some stuff, and finally call the wrapper service. That calls the unified messaging service. So a wrapper for a wrapper. Okay, there's no output, I think. No. Should be okay so far. So we haven't tested, but we have us a workflow. Okay, so let's see. So for testing, we will add a button not to the account list applet, but we'll add a button to the service request detail applet or so. So there's a method for the button, and the button invokes the workflow. So to have an active record reference and all that kind of stuff, it's a good test. So we can click on a button, the user sees the message, the user can click buttons in the message. All right, let's try this. So the applet is different. We use, let's create a service request. Do we have one? Oh, plenty. Just use the first one. And let's be lazy for test. Let's put, for example, the smart answer button. We're not using smart answer. Let's replace it with our new button. And we need the name of that applet. And it's the service request detail applet. Okay, so back to Web Tools. Let's go to that. Find the applet. There we go. And let's copy that smart answer button maybe. Let's be smart. Control B, and that's our UMF button. And the caption sure isn't smart answer, but let's call it test UMF. And just going right to see, it should, there's the method invoked, and we can of course choose anything, but I'll just stick to the script here. So method invoked is sh Siebel Hub test UMF, and everything else can stay as it is. Well, let's remove the comment or replace it. And we have a button control. Now we need to map it to the web template. So we are in Web Tools, so we can use the web template editor. And I believe it's the CA2 web template that's used. But I'm going to change it in both. Just make sure. So here, let's use the formidable web template editor, web layout editor. So, well, there's just a bit of space. We can leave the smart answer button in place. We have a placeholder 110, which is just as fine. So let's find our new UMF button, drag and drop. It should do the trick, right? Yep, got us a new button there. Let's do it for the edit, just to be on the safe side. Let's do it on the edit layout again. And putting it on the same placeholder. Okay. So that's the change. We have a button on the layout, so can say bye-bye to the editor. And now we need some user props. So it's a simple test. So we could do it in different ways, but invoking a workflow process from a button, well, first we need to enable the button. So we have can invoke method. with the method name. Let's just copy paste that to be on the safe side. Yep. So there's one user property with the method name, can invoke method, and we just set that to true. Button is always active. And then we have named method. Okay. And we could use named method on the business component as well. It would be more clever, but we quick and dirty. And then we have the invoke service method. We invoke the workflow process manager business service run process method. That's the process name. We need to change that, and we pass the row ID. So that's fine. So let's take this and put it in here and make sure we change the workflow name to the correct SR. We appended that name. Okay, that should make our button active and actually do something. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, compile, it says here. Well, we no longer compile. We would have to deliver, but let's just inspect the workspace and see what happened to the applet. So in the application, find the workspace, and we check. We have the applet, we have two workflows, copy, we have the business service, we have the changes to the service request BO. So inspect so we open and inspect the workspace, should be able to handle it. Actually, first try here, so bear with me. That's live code along. So, okay. And we should see the button, so good indicator for correct loading of the workspace. There is the button, and when we click it, well, we got us a message. Yay! Do you want to keep this SR row ID here open or reject it? Well, keep open, reject, that will not do much. It will not set the status to reject. We need a business service for that, but let's click keep open, and that's mapped to a response. Both of the buttons, so we should see a response at least. So let's go to all the responses. Let's look out for updated today. And that looks like, oh, it's a no contact, whatever. We didn't pass that, but it says accepted, which was the value we mapped out in the message. So let's check out the message again to make sure. So we have the UMF test message response. So keep open is response type accepted. That's exactly what we have seen in the response. Okay, let's see it one more time because it's so awesome. So, what happens? We have created a button that invokes a workflow. The workflow pulls out the row ID, passes other things, but pulls out the row ID of the record and passes that row ID, among other things, to the wrapper business service, which then creates the necessary input payload structure for the unified messaging service, which then opens the message type, replaces the placeholder text, and creates the message pop-up. And that's what we see. Okay, nice and clean. There's a bit of coding involved, but it's wrapper code, so you don't have to reinvent the wheels here. There's not even a single line of browser-side script, so no OpenUI scripting or even browser scripting involved. So the Siebel OpenUI framework handles that perfectly fine for us. And a nice test here. So that's a success, and there's a third part. So we're gonna take a look at this as well when we want to have the complete picture. And the third part is all about the capturing the responses with a custom business service. So in the third part of the blog articles back from 2009 and revisited for Siebel 15, and now we're revisiting them for Siebel 22, so to speak. The third part is about writing a custom business service and associating that with the message type or the responses of the message type and do something useful. So there's some code we can see here, and that basically reads the response name from the input property set. So when you associate that business service and method, the method in the property set, there's a response. And that's the name of the message. So just to make clear what you get here, let's go back to that message. So we have a message type. And that has responses. And depending on what the user clicks on as a button, you get this name. So in our case, we would either get reject or keep open. All right, just to make sure what you're talking about here. And then you can, well, we switch to response, and the example, well, gets the active business object and gets the business component, and then sets the account status to unknown. That's the example. Yeah, as you know, we're deviating from the script and using the UMF for service requests. So even if we copied that code, we would have to change it a little bit. So yeah, there's the example code. And that's actually the business service we already created. So we add a new process response function. So the code is here. And we will change that later. So we go back to Web Tools. And well, we're still in the same workspace. So we have just inspected it. So we can keep working. And go back to the business service we created. Server scripts, and it's a nice Web Tools demo. So we create that, just park the code here, and we create that process response function. Okay, so we have a process response function, and we can paste the code in here. No, that's not it. I knew I parked it somewhere, but no worries, it's there. Okay, so we get the response as we said. And case cancel is not true. We have case reject. Let's see. So case of reject, we can still get the active biz object. We can get the business component from the inputs. So that will be passed as service request. So we're on the active record, so to speak, and setting the field values. So in service request, it's just status and we set it to rejected. Okay. Let's just make sure it's status field. So let's save that. And find the service request business component. I'm sure it's the status field, but let's make double sure. Yeah, that's the field we want. And let's make sure we have a rejected value. So the idea is if the user clicks rejected in the dialog, the status goes to rejected. Right? Like so. Okay. Well, keep it open. If you click keep open, we just do nothing. So that's simple enough as a use case for a first encounter. So we need to go back to the business service one more time because we need to register that method. So we have process response. And in pre-invoke method, we need a case for that. Okay. Case process response, we call process response with inputs and outputs. Okay. There we go. And break. Okay, usual warnings, but we are fine with the business service. Okay, let's check out the blog post. What does it say? Now we need to associate the business service and method with the response. So there's a screenshot here. So there's the business service and method. It's associated to both methods here, so not sure we need to do that, but we just can go back to the message. Responses, so rejected. So the field, the payload field row ID, we just select it here and should be able to select the business service already, but I just copy paste it. And the method. Okay, so now we have associated the reject response with a business service and method. So that should trigger the business service. So now we have to re-inspect the workspace. We haven't delivered anything, just inside the workspace. Just made the change to the business service. Let's see if the article tells us. Well, the article tells us clear the cache and test. All right. So on the message type, we do clear cache. Let's go to the service request, but then before we click anything, we go to workspace and re-inspect that workspace. So, because we have changes in the workspace. New business service method. Okay, and now let's see. Click test UMF, we should get the dialog still, and now I click reject, and bingo, status is rejected. It doesn't do anything else apart from that, so if we press the button again and say keep open, it's not setting it to open again because there's no script for that, but you get the general idea how this is supposed to work. And now you have a chain of business service is really workflow process manager, a wrapper business service, the real thing business service as documented. And then in the responses, you have one or more other business service methods or even workflows that can do any kind of thing. So that is very, very valuable indeed. And well, there's an extra customize the message applet. It gives us the name of the applet that actually pops up. So in case you want to customize that, but well, you could go out of your way with maybe OpenUI or style sheets. But let's stop here. We have a nice validation of the unified messaging framework in Siebel 22. So if you go back to these articles, keep in mind they have been written for older versions of Siebel. But if you apply this to the newer world of Siebel, it's still valid information and you can put it to good work. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for watching this code along and take care. Bye-bye.